Boy is South not a liked character in the RVB community. After stating in one of my videos that I liked South a lot more than Wash, that both surprisingly and not so surprisingly stirred up a lot of emotions from people. I was under the impression, opinions are a thing and everyone has them, so while mine are different, there will be people who disagree with me, but they will accept it because it's an opinion. Unfortunately, I forgot that's not how the internet works. There was such a pushback from people who were just so confused that those words just came out of my mouth. And so I'll escalate that by saying South is my favorite Freelancer. I don't think she's quite my favorite character, but she's up there. And some people in the comments asked very nicely, there were very few of those, hey, can you explain why you like South so much? So to indulge those nice people, and those who are willing to hear someone's opinion on a character, let me explain why I like South Dakota so much. Now, probably the biggest factor as to why South is my favorite really comes down to personal biases that I play towards when it comes to certain characters. There are just certain traits and aspects that draw me towards characters when I'm looking to form an opinion on someone. These are things that apply to me and not other people, and one of the biases that I play towards is the gender. I tend to like female characters more so than male characters. Why? I don't really know. Maybe I find them more interesting. Maybe male characters have begun to bore me. But usually when it comes to shows and video games and such, I lean more so in the favor of female characters. So when it comes to characters such as South, Tex, Caroline, and CT, I played in favor of. So they had an advantage when it comes to my default favorite Freelancer list. But that advantage comes when I don't know anything about anyone, so they haven't right or wronged me. As time goes on and we learn more about them, this is where they begin to rise and fall on said list. Speaking of gravitating towards female characters, I also gravitate towards siblings. Being a sibling myself, it's one of those things where you look for relatable traits you have with characters so you can connect with them more. So when I learned that North and South were siblings, that was a trait that made me interested in their characters more so than the others. I also feel as though I need to mention for some people who have been following the show for a long time, watching it week by week as the episodes went by and the seasons went by and all the years went by as well, I myself didn't watch Red vs. Blue until season 10 had wrapped. So while South may have been introduced in season 6, and 4 years later you'll learn more about her in Project Freelancer technically speaking, for me it was a matter of a couple days, if that, from being introduced to her to knowing about Project Freelancer's whole deal. So this burn that some fans may have had for however long knowing what she did, I didn't have because everything happened so fast. So back to what I was saying about siblings. Upon learning that North and South were siblings, that was something I could relate to. So usually when you're the younger sibling, which I am, most of the time you end up getting second pick. And while my brother doesn't watch Red vs. Blue, it's still ingrained in my nature to be drawn towards the opposite of what he would pick or what he relates to. And in this case, South is the opposite, and she's the younger of the two. So, living a pattern that I always have, I pick the secondary character as opposed to the main one, relatively speaking. My brother would pick Luigi because he's taller, and I would pick Mario because he's smaller. He chooses red team, I choose blue. I've gone the opposite of his decisions my entire life, and South, I feel safe in saying, would be the opposite. So those two are really the biases that I play towards when it comes to my default of liking her. But what about canon story that the audience pays attention to when it comes to her character? Why do people hate South the most? Probably the biggest reason people hate her backstabbing. How could you like a character who literally stabs everyone in the back? How could you like a character who quote-unquote complains all the time? And that's the thing, so many people just see red when they hear South's name and forget why she's like this. It's not her fault she's so obsessive over wanting to get an AI and ultimately stabbing her brother in the back. She's like this because of Project Freelancer. People forget how truly awful of a program Project Freelancer actually was. North and South were recruited because of their bond for an experiment. Unknowingly, the two were under the test to see what would happen when one sibling got an AI and the other did not. North, obviously the one who was ultimately given an AI. So, because of that, no matter what South would do, she would never be given an AI. And so many people forget that. The reason she's constantly complaining when someone else gets an AI is because she wants one, but was never going to be given one. That would have ruined the director's test. So when it comes to basic human emotions, South was constantly within arm's reach of being given something that she was essentially promised. However, unbeknownst to her, she was never going to attain this goal. And because of this experiment, the director's test was essentially successful. We saw what happened when two siblings who are close and only one of them gets an AI. It drove the other into overwhelming jealousy because to her, everyone else was given higher priority. New guy shows up. New guy gets an AI. What about South? She's proven how good of a soldier she is. She's told how skilled of a warrior she is. And yet, the AI, which is essentially a reward for being such a great soldier, South would never feel as though she accomplished that potential. And that is the biggest thing that a lot of people who drag South's name through the mud forget. Hardly any of the Freelancers were actually villains, let alone bad people. You think North and South made it this far in their lives with one of them hating the other and wanting to kill him? No, their bond was torn apart by Project Freelancer. The thing that was evil was Project Freelancer and the experiments that they conducted. The soldiers and the people were just caught in the crossfire, South being one of them as well. But what about the fact that she still shot Wash and she still shot her brother, making her still an awful person? While yes, those things are unfortunate, or at least one of those things is unfortunate, that's as expected. While yes, the fairy tale ending would have been when North carried South out of the building and the sibling bond prevailed and the story ended there. Yes, I would have preferred that ending. However, Red vs. Blue played the harsh reality. South's mind and emotions were too far down the rabbit hole. Project Freelancer messed her up too much for her to pull herself out, and so Wash and North were shot. While most people who dislike South hold that against her, I myself see where the true problem stemmed from. South was simply a catalyst. But still, why is she my favorite Freelancer over all the other Freelancers? Carolina, Wash, North, why not them? As for North, he kinda just bored me. He was too generic for me. He was happy, kind, cared for people, all that generic stuff. He's not the interesting one of the siblings. Wash never really hooked me in terms of his character. He also was the one who shot South, so that's another reason he's not so high up. And Carolina, I'm not one for characters who are supposed to be the cool, badass one. That's yet another personal bias that I have. It's like an anti-bias. If you're supposed to be cool, I don't think you're cool. And Carolina kind of falls into that. And that's the thing, so many people have the exact same feelings when it comes to characters. The good guys are super cool and awesome, while all the bad guys and villains can go die in a hole. People take a character at face value and don't think twice about it, which is one of the reasons I think South isn't a liked character. Oh, North was really nice and South put a bullet in his back, so because the nice guy was hurt, I don't like the mean girl. And that's the other thing, South never actually killed anyone, aside from the hundreds of soldiers she did kill. Let me rephrase that, South never killed anyone of importance. She wounded them. She didn't put a bullet in North's head, she just put a bullet in his back so she could run away. Maine killed North. All she did was increase her chances of survival by wounding her brother. And be honest, who doesn't think of that tactic in real life? All I have to do is run faster than my friend or trip him so I can get away. We've all had those plans. But honestly, yes, putting a bullet in her brother and Wash is an action that very easily turns an audience against you. It's like that mentality of, if you want to make a bad guy, just have someone choke a puppy and the audience will very easily turn against whoever does that. And yes, South had to be stopped with how far she'd gone. But just because her character had actions that quote-unquote wronged the audience, for me, it's about how she got to the point she is and understanding her story and the promises that were never fulfilled for her. All those things make her my favorite Freelancer and one of my favorite characters. So there you have it. That is the reason I like South so much. Some of it because I play by my own personal biases, and the other giant chunk because of her story. I don't expect to change anyone's mind who watches this video. I don't even plan to. I just wanted to explain why this character was so disliked by so many people isn't in fact as bad as people like to make her out to be.